Hi everyone, I'm Richard and I'm here today to talk about the 2015 Apple TV. It's like a one-part media streaming box and one-part games machine. So what's the big idea here? Well, basically Apple and indeed Google, Nvidia, many others believe that the future of our streaming media boxes is all about using apps for a connected experience. But first, let's take a good look at the hardware itself. The new Apple TV is a pretty anonymous looking rounded black box. It's almost identical to last year's model, but it is a little taller. Port selection, it's very basic. You're looking at HDMI that's limited to 1080p, Ethernet and power. There's a USB Type-C socket there too, but you can't do anything with it. The remote is the star of the show and where Apple has chosen to concentrate much of its innovation. There are two key elements here. Firstly, there's the touchpad. A smooth UI relies on a much more intuitive interface, and the idea here is that you glide your thumb over the pad in order to move between different elements. This is backed up by a clickable button underneath for choosing your selection. Secondly, there's the Siri search button. It's the only concave curved button on the remote, meaning that Apple wants you to hold it down. And while it's held down, the voice recognition interface awaits your commands. From a gaming perspective, there's not much meat here. The Apple TV remote is like a less precise version of Nintendo's Wiimote Waggle controller. So you've got the motion sensors and gyroscopes on top of the touchpad and the clicky button. It feels a little too compromised, to be honest, in many ways. One further annoyance is the fact that the remote itself is charged using the lightning port on the bottom. Now that's fine in theory, except no charger is included in the box, just the cable. So you either need to find a mobile USB adapter or else charge it from your PC. So the remote really is central to the experience, but there's the sense that it perhaps isn't quite as good as it could have been. The touchpad just feels a little too small and your thumb ends up swiping off the edges all of the time. Secondly, the clicking motion on the remote, it feels a little cheap, to be honest, and considering the amount of R&D that Apple has put into haptic feedback on devices like the new iPhone and the Retina MacBook Pro, it just doesn't feel quite good enough. It feels almost last gen, to be honest. So what about the Siri button? How do voice commands hold up? Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. Just like Android TV, Siri is capable of understanding some pretty advanced questions, like show me the best action movies of 2010, for example, or I want to see movies by Christopher Nolan. From there, you get similar results to Android TV, pretty much everything you want, and additional recommendations on top of that. Voice control works for Apple's iTunes service, and it also fully integrates Netflix too, which is something that Android TV doesn't really do at this time. These two key services are integrated into the voice-controlled front end, and it works pretty well. Unfortunately, just like Android TV, only a smattering of apps actually support voice control, and if only some work and not others, it's not a fully unified interface. Similar to Android TV, once you start to realize that voice control only works on certain apps, inevitably you end up not really using it that much at all, instead reverting back to the standard interface. And it's fair to say that the Apple TV front end, as it is at launch, is a little weak. If you visit the App Store, you see everything divided into their appropriate categories, and that works fine. But the main menu screen on the Apple TV just lists all of the icons from top to bottom, with no way of sorting them. So media programs live amongst the games and other apps. It sort of feels half-finished, to be honest. Now, generally speaking, as a gaming interface, I'm not a fan of the Apple remote at all, but I should say that the actual interface navigation is an improvement over the standard, typical remote clicky buttons. But the one area where the difference is actually a bit of a revelation comes in seeking and scanning through a video timeline. It's effortless, responsive, and a genuine improvement. So Apple is positioning its new device as more than just a media consumption box. It's all about the apps. And there's some interesting stuff on the App Store already. There's stuff like interactive cookbooks, and one thing that I'll recommend checking out is the Airbnb app. Now that's really interesting because it sort of highlights what's good about the interface and also some pretty profound limitations too. This is pretty neat actually, giving you full screen photography of the locations and the properties available. But the interface also highlights the weakness of TV-style apps. They look great, but there's a lack of functionality. You can't book a property here. You can only mark the properties of interest. From there, you go to Airbnb on your desktop or tablet and complete the booking there. Which begs the question, why use the app at all when you can view properties more quickly and book them without delay on a PC or a mobile device? So the new Apple TV, it feels almost like a first-gen product, to be honest. There's some really good ideas here, particularly in terms of discovering new video content, films, TV shows, that kind of things. And there's the beginning of some good stuff in terms of apps. But It's also a games machine, so how does it stack up there? Let's look at one of the most impressive games first. This is Geometry Wars 3, a direct port of the console versions. It's running at 1080p, it's pretty close to a locked 60 FPS, and it's rather brilliant actually. There's just one problem, and that's the remote. All Apple TV games need to be compatible with a remote, which severely limits functionality. Geometry Wars 3 is a twin-stick shooter, forced to work without two sticks, let alone one. The developer's solution here is pretty straightforward. The game takes control of aiming and firing. All you need to do is use the trackpad to move the ship about, while clicking the pad activates a smart bomb. Fine in theory, but it inherently compromises everything the game's about, and the lack of precision on the touchpad can often be infuriating. In fact, even basic movement can be a bit of a pain. On a simple game like Crossy Road here, you swipe in the direction you want to go, but unless you concentrate on holding the remote absolutely straight, swiping up can be interpreted as swiping left or swiping right, leading to many frustrating deaths. Galaxy on Fire makes a good stab at using the motion sensors for general movement, but it brings to mind memories of the first wave of PlayStation 3 games using the 6-axis gyroscope controls. Fundamentally, waving about a remote as a form of control feels imprecise and unsatisfying. Asphalt 8 does make a better fist of it though. You hold the controller on its side and tilt it left and right to steer. The lack of feedback isn't great, but it does work. And there's an interesting wrinkle here. Pressing the touchpad button here allows you to brake, while pressing the pause button ignites the nitrous. So there are actually two buttons available for developers to use on the remote. The Harmonix game Beat Sports was showcased at the reveal of the new Apple TV, and it's very much a title in the Wii Sports mode, built around the motion controller. But the gameplay is very simplistic. The graphics are quite basic and frame rates are quite poor. It's early days on the App Store, but already there's quite a flourishing catalogue of games appearing, and all of them are compatible with the bundled remote, and that's both a good and a bad thing. Obviously you can play all of the titles out of the box, but the remote itself isn't really up to scratch as a gaming interface. And the frame rate problems in Beat Sports kind of reminded us that the processor at the heart of the Apple TV is last year's A8, not the A9 in the new iPhone. And there's the sense that Apple isn't really fully committed here. They're giving us last year's gaming technology when really we want the best of the best for a console launch. At the end of the day, this isn't a console replacement, but a nice enough casual gaming box that is bundled with a controller that doesn't quite do the job. Of course, you can buy a proper gaming controller which solves all of these issues, but that's an additional £40. But the real question is how good it works as a media device. And in this sense, before you're even thinking about buying this piece of kit, you need to make sure that the media apps you want are actually there. Now, iTunes, Netflix, YouTube, they're all there, that's good. On top of that, there's a lot of US-orientated media apps too, particularly for sports fans. But outside of North America, pickings are slim. We're UK-based, and the BBC's iPlayer has almost reached a cultural icon status here. Now, we've been waiting for an Apple TV version of that app for years now, and it's still not here. Sky's news channel and its Now TV streaming service are represented, but none of the major video-on-demand catch-up TV apps are there. On top of that, there's no Amazon Instant Video app available either. In short, there are some major gaps in the media portfolio here, and this basically means that the new Apple TV isn't a one-stop shop for media streaming. The box has plenty of charms, but the chances are that you're still going to require another device with better media support to fully get the job done. So that's the 2015 Apple TV then. There's a lot of potential here, but it doesn't feel like the support is quite there yet for it to become a must-have device. But it's not the only next-gen media streamer that's coming along. Nvidia's Shield Android TV, that's already out, and of course Amazon's next-generation Fire TV is also available. Now we're going to be taking a look at all three of those in due course. But that's all we've got for now. Give us a like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe to Digital Foundry to make sure you don't miss a thing. Thanks for watching.